what you can do for your country. Ask what your country can do for you.
How late are you here tonight?
At 8 o'clock, 8 to 8.
Okay.
Better than my last job, I'll tell you that. That was all night, every night.
Not a lot of jobs around here, huh?
I'll say. I don't know what the people do all day. Used to be a mill, but it's been closed a long time now. Don't know what they do.
Can't get a job without an address anyway. Or a phone.
You can't get an address without an address. You can't get a job without a job. It's all fixed.
That's why I'm going to Alaska. Here they need people.
I hear it's real pretty up there.
Yeah.
lugar alto no deserto, perto de uma cortina azul. As saias de janeiro estão onduladas. Mas aqui embaixo, na cidade dos holofotes, os fãs do rio estão contundentes. E você não pode negar que viver é fácil. Se você nunca olhou por trás do cenário.
So Ma was trying to explain something to me about Grandma when they grew up, but I couldn't pay attention to her because I was 5 years old and I was petrified. I had just seen The Green Lady. Now, about a week earlier, I'd watched that movie Godzilla, the one about that huge lizard-like beast storming a major city, and the thought of a green monster coming from me was stuck in my mind. And yet there I was at the tip of Lower Manhattan with my mom, just staring at her. Her horns, her muscles, all of it just frightened me. And I didn't know whether she was a monster or a hero. So I decided to consult the Google of the day. Ma. My mother explained that the Green Lady is actually the Statue of Liberty and that she was waving immigrants in. Now, the part of her explanation that really messed with my young head was the fact that, according to Ma, long before us, the Green Lady was actually brown like me, and that she changed colors over the years. Now, much like America, now the part that really is intriguing about this is that when she changed colors, she made me think about myself. Now, it all made sense to me because as a first-generation American, I was surrounded by immigrants. In fact, within my immediate social circle of the people who support me, who enrich my life, at least 2 are foreign-born. My life as a U.S. citizen is in many ways shaped by newcomers, and chances are, so is yours. There are more than 40 million immigrants in the USA. According to census data, a quarter of the nation's children have at least one foreign-born parent. I know all these statistics because I study global migration patterns. I'm a journalist, and for the last few years, I've been documenting the lives of U.S. citizens who lost people to deportation, and the numbers are enormous. From 2008 to 2016, more than 3 million people were ordered removed. That's the technical term for being deported. There is an economic, a political, a psychological, and an emotional cost to those deportations. It's the moments when these circles are broken. I once asked a US soldier, "Why did you volunteer to fight this war?" And she told me, "Because I'm proud to defend my country." But I pressed her, "No, really, when you're on base and you hear bombs exploding in the distance and you see soldiers coming back who are gravely injured, in that moment, when you know you could be next, what does my country mean?" She looked at me. My country is my wife, my family, my friends, my soldiers. What she was telling me is that my country is a collection of these strong relationships, these social circles. When the social circles are weakened, a country itself is weaker. We're missing a crucial aspect in the debate about immigration policy. Rather than focusing on individuals, we should focus on the circles around them, because these are the people who are left behind. The voters, the taxpayers, the ones who are suffering that loss. And it's not just the children of the deported who are impacted. You have brothers and sisters who are separated by borders. You have classmates, teachers, law enforcement officers, technologists, scientists, doctors, who are all scrambling to make sense of new realities when their social circles are broken. These are the real lives behind all these statistics that dominate discussions about immigration policy, but we don't often think about them. And I'm trying to change that. Here's just one of the real-life stories that I've collected, and it still haunts me. I met Ramon and his son in 2016. the same year both of them were being ordered out of the country. Ramon was being deported to Latin America, while his son, who was a sergeant in the US military, was being deployed. Deported, deployed. If you just look at Ramon's case, it wouldn't be clear how deeply connected to the country he is. But consider his son, a US citizen defending a country that's banished his father. The social circle is what's key here. Here's another example that illustrates those critical bonds. A group of citizens in Philadelphia were concerned about their jobs because the legal owner of the restaurant where they worked was an undocumented immigrant, and immigration officials had picked him up. They rallied behind him. An immigration lawyer argued he was too important to the local community to be deported. At the hearing, they even submitted restaurant reviews. In the end, a judge exercised what's called judicial discretion and allowed him to stay in the country, but only because they considered the social circle. There are 23 million non-citizens in the USA, according to verifiable federal data. And that doesn't include the undocumented, because numbers for that population are at best a complex estimate. So let's just work with what we have. That's 23 million social circles, about 100 million individuals whose lives could be impacted by deportation, and the stress of it all is trickling down to the population. A 2017 poll by UCLA of LA County residents found that 30% of citizens in LA County are stressed about deportation, not because they themselves could be removed, but rather because members of their social circle were at risk. Now, I am not suggesting that no one should ever be deported. Don't confuse me with that. But what I am saying is that we need to look at the bigger picture. If you are within the sound of my voice, I want you to close your eyes for a moment and examine your own social circle. Who are your foreign-born? What would it feel like if the circle were broken? Share your story. I'm building a global archive of first-person accounts and linking them with mapping technology so that we can see exactly where these circles break. Because this is not just an American issue. There are 250 million migrants around the world, people living, loving, and learning in countries where they were not born. And in my career, in my life, I've been one of them. In China, in Africa, in Europe. And each time I become one of these foreigners, one of these strange-looking guys in a new land, I can't help but think back to that day when I was in Lower Manhattan with my mom, all those decades ago, when I was scared, and I had just spotted that green lady. And I guess the question that I keep on thinking about when I see her, and all the younger replicas of her that are so obviously brown, and even the paintings that showcase her in the beginning as not quite green. When I look at all of that, the question that my research seeks to answer becomes to me the same one that confounded me all those years ago. Is she a monster or a hero?
Structure fire for Light Force 64. We're taking some pretty heavy flak on Adams about Hobart. There are three separate structure fires through the window. Like the PD in that area is the fire company's assigned. We have a fireman shot. We need help immediately. Roger, OCD, we can't see us out in front of the gurney.
They're dispatching LAPD units along with all fire trucks that respond to major emergency blazes for our protection. But with respect to trying to get LAPD service or anything else, folks, you're on your own down there.
There are fires burning, there are people being beaten, there is looting. It is a dangerous night in the city of Los Angeles.
É hora do show para climas secos. E o caos está sonhando com a chuva. Quando as montanhas do rio estão queimando. Palmeiras são velas no vento assassino. Então, muitas vidas estão na brisa. Até as estrelas estão constrangidas. E o rio está incendiando.
The last time I heard my son's voice was when he walked out the front door on his way to school. He called out one word in the darkness, "Bye." It was April 20th, 1999. Later that morning at Columbine High School, my son Dylan and his friend Eric killed 12 students and a teacher and wounded more than 20 others before taking their own lives. 13 innocent people were killed, leaving their loved ones in a state of grief and trauma. Others sustained injuries, some resulting in disfigurement and permanent disability. But the enormity of the tragedy can't be measured only by the number of deaths and injuries that took place. There's no way to quantify the psychological damage of those who were in the school or who took part in rescue or cleanup efforts. There's no way to assess the magnitude of a tragedy like Columbine, especially when it can be a blueprint for other shooters who go on to commit atrocities of their own. Columbine was a tidal wave, and when the crash ended, it would take years for the community and for society to comprehend its impact. It has taken me years to try to accept my son's legacy. The cruel behavior that defined the end of his life showed me that he was a completely different person from the one I knew. Afterwards, people asked, "How could you not know? What kind of a mother were you?" I still ask myself those same questions. Before the shootings, I thought of myself as a good mom, helping my children become caring, healthy, responsible adults was the most important role in my life. But the tragedy convinced me that I failed as a parent, and it's partially this sense of failure that brings me here today. Aside from his father, I was the one person who knew and loved Dylan the most. If anyone could have known what was happening, it should have been me, right? But I didn't know. Today, I'm here to share the experience of what it's like to be the mother of someone who kills and hurts. For years after the tragedy, I combed through memories, trying to figure out exactly where I failed as a parent. But there are no simple answers. I can't give you any solutions. All I can do is share what I have learned. When I talk to people who didn't know me before the shootings, I have 3 challenges to meet. First, when I walk into a room like this, I never know if someone there has experienced loss because of what my son did. I feel a need to acknowledge the suffering caused by a member of my family who wasn't here to do it for himself. So first, with all of my heart, I'm sorry if my son has caused you pain. The second challenge I have is that I must ask for understanding and even compassion when I talk about my son's death as a suicide. 2 years before he died, he wrote on a piece of paper in a notebook that he was cutting himself. He said that he was in agony and wanted to get a gun so he could end his life. I didn't know about any of this until months after his death. When I talk about his death as a suicide, I'm not trying to downplay the viciousness he showed at the end of his life. I'm trying to understand how his suicidal thinking led to murder. After a lot of reading and talking with experts, I've come to believe that his involvement in the shootings was rooted not in his desire to kill, but in his desire to die. The third challenge I have when I talk about my son's murder-suicide is that I'm talking about mental health. Is that I'm talking about mental health, or brain health as I prefer to call it because it's more concrete. And in the same breath, I'm talking about violence. The last thing I want to do is to contribute to the misunderstanding that already exists around mental illness. Only a very small percent of those who have a mental illness are violent toward other people. But of those who die by suicide, it's estimated that about 75 to maybe more than 90% have a diagnosable mental health condition of some kind. As you all know very well, our mental health care system is not equipped to help everyone. And not everyone with destructive thoughts fits the criteria for a specific diagnosis. Many who have ongoing feelings of fear or anger or hopelessness are never assessed or treated. Too often they get our attention only if they reach a behavioral crisis. If estimates are correct, that about 1 to 2% of all suicides involves the murder of another person, when suicide rates rise, as they are rising for some populations, then murder-suicide rates will rise as well. I wanted to understand what was going on in Dylan's mind prior to his death. So I looked for answers from other survivors of suicide loss. I did research and volunteered to help with fundraising events. And whenever I could, I talked with those who had survived their own suicidal crisis or attempt. One of the most helpful conversations I had was with a coworker who overheard me talking to someone else in my office cubicle. She heard me say that Dylan could not have loved me if he could do something as horrible as he did. Later, when she found me alone, she apologized for overhearing that conversation, but told me that I was wrong. She said that when she was a young single mother with 3 small children, she became severely depressed and was hospitalized to keep her safe. At the time, she was certain that her children would be better off if she died, so she had made a plan to end her life. She assured me that a mother's love was the strongest bond on earth, and that she loved her children more than anything in the world. But because of her illness, she was sure that they would be better off without her. What she said, and what I've learned from others, is that we do not make the so-called decision or choice to die by suicide in the same way that we choose what car to drive or where to go on a Saturday night. When someone is in an extremely suicidal state, they are in a stage 4 medical health emergency. Their thinking is impaired and they've lost access to tools of self-governance. Even though they can make a plan and act with logic, their sense of truth is distorted by a filter of pain, through which they interpret their reality. Some people can be very good at hiding this state, and they often have good reasons for doing that. Many of us have suicidal thoughts at some point, but persistent, ongoing thoughts of suicide and devising a means to die are symptoms of pathology, and like many illnesses, the condition has to be recognized and treated before a life is lost. But my son's death was not purely a suicide. It involved mass murder. I wanted to know how his suicidal thinking became homicidal. But research is sparse, and there are no simple answers. Yes, he probably had ongoing depression. He had a personality that was perfectionistic and self-reliant, and that made him less likely to seek help from others. He had experienced triggering events at the school that left him feeling debased and humiliated and mad. And he had a complicated friendship with a boy who shared his feelings of rage and alienation, and who was seriously disturbed, controlling, and homicidal. And on top of this period in his life of extreme vulnerability and fragility, Dylan found access to guns, even though we'd never owned any in our home. It was appallingly easy for a 17-year-old boy to buy guns, both legally and illegally, without my permission or knowledge. And somehow, 17 years and many school shootings later, it's still appallingly easy. What Dylan did that day broke my heart. And as trauma so often does, it took a toll on my body and on my mind. 2 years after the shootings, I got breast cancer. And 2 years after that, I began to have mental health problems. On top of the constant, perpetual grief, I was terrified that I would run into a family member of someone Dylan had killed, or be accosted by the press, or by an angry citizen. I was afraid to turn on the news, afraid to hear myself being called a terrible parent or a disgusting person. I started having panic attacks. The first bout started 4 years after the shootings, when I was getting ready for the depositions and would have to meet the victims' families face to face. The second round started 6 years after the shootings, when I was preparing to speak publicly about murder-suicide for the first time at a conference. Both episodes lasted several weeks. The attacks happened everywhere, in the hardware store, in my office, or even while reading a book in bed. My mind would suddenly lock into this spinning cycle of terror, and no matter how hard I tried to calm myself down or reason my way out of it, I couldn't do it. It felt as if my brain was trying to kill me. And then being afraid of being afraid consumed all of my thoughts. That's when I learned firsthand what it feels like to have a malfunctioning mind. And that's when I truly became a brain health advocate. With therapy and medication and self-care, life eventually returned to whatever could be thought of as normal under the circumstances. When I look back on all that had happened, I could see that my son's spiral into dysfunction probably occurred over a period of about 2 years. Plenty of time to get him help. If only someone had known that he needed help and known what to do. Every time someone asks me, "How could you not have known?" it feels like a punch in the gut. It carries accusation and taps into my feelings of guilt that no matter how much therapy I've had, I will never fully eradicate. But here's something I've learned. If love were enough to stop someone who was suicidal from hurting themselves, suicides would hardly ever happen. But love is not enough, and suicide is prevalent. It's the second leading cause of death for people aged 10 to 34. And 15% of American youth report having made a suicide plan in the last year. I've learned that no matter how much we want to believe we cannot know or control everything our loved ones think and feel. And the stubborn belief that we are somehow different, that someone we love would never think of hurting themselves or someone else, can cause us to miss what's hidden in plain sight. And if worst case scenarios do come to pass, we'll have to learn to forgive ourselves for not knowing, or for not asking the right questions, or not finding the right treatment. We should always assume that someone we love may be suffering, regardless of what they say or how they act. We should listen with our whole being, without judgment and without offering solutions. I know that I will live with this tragedy, with these multiple tragedies, for the rest of my life. I know that in the minds of many, what I lost can't compare to what the other families lost. I know my struggle doesn't make theirs any easier. I know there are even some who think I don't have the right to any pain, but only to a life of permanent penance. In the end, what I know comes down to this. The tragic fact is that even the most vigilant and responsible of us may not be able to help. But for love's sake, we must never stop trying.
Isso não é um teste do novo sistema de emergência. Quando a barra queima e as torres de rádio conspiram para dançar outra vez. E eu não acredito no objetivo da mídia. Eles só estão tentando vender realidade. Pegue isso no horário nobre. História das 9. E todo mundo está ficando insano quando as montanhas do Rio estão queimando.
Escuta, moço. Acho que temos pouco a conversar. De minha parte, eu quero dizer que estou muito surpreso e que me enganei. Quero que você tome seu rumo. O rumo que você escolheu. Porque esta não é, nunca foi e nunca vai ser a casa de um fura-greve.
Eu só queria dizer que não foi por covardia.
Vai ver que não é? Você até que teve peito. Você furou a greve fazendo comício. Não fez segredo. Não fez como o jesuíno que tentou acender uma vela a Deus e outra ao diabo. Você é ainda mais filho da mãe. Você não é um traidor por covardia. Você é um traidor por convicção.
Olha aqui, eu não sou não filho da mãe. Eu gosto do meu pessoal. Mas eu preferi ter o desprezo deles a estar me arriscando a ver minha mulher sofrer como minha mãe sofre, como todo mundo aqui sofre.
Tá certo. No fundo, a culpa não é só tua, não. Eu tive culpa.
Culpa nenhuma, pai.
Eu tive culpa.
Culpa de quê, porra?
E deixa eu acreditar nisso. Senão eu vou sofrer muito mais. Eu vou achar que meu filho caiu na merda sozinho. Eu vou achar que meu filho é um safado de nascença. Olha, rapaz. Nós não temos mais nada a dizer. Essa casa não é tua mais.
You're my mother. You're my father. You're my mother. You're my whole family. You're even my friend, Gloria. You're my girlfriend, too.
Well, I'd like to be family.
You think they're gonna catch us, huh?
I don't know. Probably. They can't beat the system.
What's the system?
System? I don't know.
Then how do you know you can't beat it?
Well, not too many people have.
Then have some people did?
Yeah, I think so.
National Guardsmen. They are on standby, prepared to move. Transport has been arranged, and it is our purpose here at the state government level to restore law and order and to minimize the danger to the residents of the area. This is a matter that needs to be settled in the courts and not in the streets.
Attention. Faut que j'essaie de descendre mon trépied en même temps. Là. Ok, j'ai mon trépied. Oh, si, on a... Oh, c'est trop beau.
C'est quoi?
C'est trop beau. Non.
Un drone.
Non. Ok, je l'ai. Ok, là, vous allez voir la vie. Là. Vous allez voir une vie autre que la nôtre, ok? Checkez ça.
On le voit.
Checkez ça. Checkez ça, merci. On te voit, hein, on te voit. Je sais pas si tu nous entends, mais on te voit.
C'est quoi?
Hey, non, faut pas qu'il soit là, s'il vous plaît.
Ici, touche pas.
Rémi.
Viens ici.
On te voit, hein, on te voit.
C'est quoi?
On te voit.
Hey, ça brille, hein? Hey, c'était vraiment nice. Ça brille.
Ah,
Reste ici, Rémi.
Ok,
Rémi,
là.
reste ici, viens voir.
Ok, je vais la rechercher.
Ah oui, tu l'as. Reste ici, Rémi. Papa, il est là, il s'en vient. C'est quoi? Ça a l'air... Hey, ça a deux moteurs.
C'est un vaisseau.
On le voit!
C'est vraiment ça.
Viens voir, maman, c'est vraiment nice.
C'est ça qu'on se demande.
Ciao!
O letreiro avisa: o fim dos dias. Ramos de jacarandá estão se curvando nas cinzas. Mais uma questão do que uma maldição. Como pode o inferno ser algo pior? As chamas estão maravilhosas. As câmeras estão correndo. Então tome cuidado.